Welcome, everyone. This is John Malanka with The Sacred Plant, and I have a special guest with us today. She's been part of our community actually since day one of our launch in 2017. Our guest today is Kristin Rosenqvist from Reno, Nevada, and she has a great story to share. And Kristin, let me bring you on, and so you can share your side of the story and what you've gone through and how you found us and where you are today.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was first diagnosed with cancer in 2005 with invasive ductal carcinoma, a type of breast cancer. And I went through the allopathic model of neoadjuvant chemotherapy and surgery and then radiation. And I went 11 years, just working on my health and trying to make sure that I didn't get a recurrence of the cancer. But what I actually found was that the chemo itself had weakened me so much, and I ended up with fibromyalgia and all kinds of other autoimmune conditions, and so I've been struggling with my health ever since. And in that search for answers, somehow the Sacred Plant came into my inbox, and I signed up for the webinar. And I had never used cannabis before, not even as a teenager, and I was completely open to it. And you guys just touched my heart, and I just knew that if anything ever happened to me, that if I did get a recurrence, that this is the path I would take. I knew it was my path. And evidently that was in the beginning of June 2017. Yeah. A week or two later is when I had my mammogram. And they told me on July 3rd, after we got the biopsy results back, that I had cancer again in the opposite breast. And it was the same kind of cancer. It was, identical, HER2 negative, ERPR positive, et cetera, except that it was much smaller this time around. It was only 0.5 centimeters. And I was so weak from being sick all these years that I knew that if I went through cancer and radiation again, that it would take away whatever was left of my brain, which had already taken a big hit with chemo. And I just knew I didn't want to go through that again. And of course, I had the knowledge of the Sacred Plant behind me. So that's what started me. And I had always had a clean diet. I was eating turmeric every day. I was doing lots of cruciferous vegetables, all those things to keep breast cancer away. And yet I still got it back. And I knew I needed a big gun, that diet wasn't going to do it alone. So as soon as I was diagnosed, I was on the phone to my GP, my family doctor, and the next day I was in his office and he wrote me a script, and I drove to Carson City and I got my license. I mean, it was just as fast as I could. Within 3 or 4 days, I had cannabis in my hands. And I started with taking RSO. So I was using a slightly different model, not microdosing. I was using the higher doses. And it's been quite a journey. The end result was that in June of 2018, I had a completely clean thermogram that shows absolutely no sign of cancer. And I've had lots of blood work done, and all my blood work is normal. Everything looks good. And as far as I know, at this point, I'm cancer-free. So now it's been 6 months of this. Was confirmed. I've had 3 sets of thermograms in the meantime to make sure everything's okay. And now I'm just continuing to work on my health. I'm doing everything I did to cure cancer, except that because of financial reasons, I had to cut way back on my dosages. But I'm still doing everything I did before. I didn't want to leave anything out that I thought was really helping me. And now I'm looking to get to the underlying reason for my fibromyalgia and autoimmune conditions, and see if I can get those completely healed too. But the cannabis is really working in that area. I know that if I lower my dosage, my autoimmune symptoms come back. And if I raise the dosage to where I'm comfortable, then the autoimmune systems are actually going away as well. So it's not just helping the cancer, it's cured scars, huge scars that I had that went away, that have healed. All of my autoimmune, and I have multiple autoimmune conditions, have all been improved. So cannabis has been pretty much a miracle for me, but it's also been part of a bigger program where I have an absolutely pristine diet. I live alone and I can control what comes and goes in my house and what gets prepared here. I'm taking plenty of supplements that are very high quality, good sourced. I even have worked a lot on how I take the supplements so that they don't cancel each other out, and so I get the most absorbency. I've also worked on a lot of spiritual issues and emotional issues with EFT, meditation, and I've done a lot of spiritual work as well. And I think that cannabis, like I said, was my big gun that I was putting my most faith in a sense, but I ended up putting a whole lot more faith in the end in faith itself. That's what I learned was one of the biggest parts of my healing.
I always incorporate, giving it a 1, 2, 3 punch, and that's what you've done, not including, just using cannabis alone, and diet, prayer. I know you do tapping, which I'm a fan of, meditation. And you were healthy. You were in great shape prior becoming getting a diagnosis of cancer, correct?
Yeah, I had been an athlete, and I was in some of the best shape of my life back in October 2005. I was looking forward to the ski season. I was in awesome shape and thought everything was going great. My weight was just right. I was in a good direction, and then I got this diagnosis, and I have never skied since. I tried one day the following winter after cancer therapy, and I didn't even make it to the chairlift, basically. I skied back to the lodge from this chairlift and sat and cried.
Because of pain or weakness or energy?
Weakness.
Yeah.
Weakness, no energy.
And so a lot of these autoimmune issues came after your cancer diagnosis, correct?
Yeah, what I was talking about, for instance, just being weak, that was purely from the cancer. When I really came down with the autoimmune problems was in June. It was June 30th, overnight of 2007. So it was about 6 months or so, a little bit more, 6 to 9 months after my treatment had ended. And that's when I was hit with the autoimmune disease. And that's when the pain, from the fibro and all these other symptoms started.
You're great with dates, and that's something that I am. And when you have stuff like this, you'll never forget those dates. I mean, I go through every day of remembering where we were, what dates, things where we were diagnosed, what we went through. And it sounds like you're the same.
Yeah, I think it actually is a form of trauma, just like a trauma victim will remember certain points of what happened to them and will stick in their memory. And they don't forget those details ever. And things around it might be a fog, but there are certain details that you never forget. And it's like, where were you when the space shuttle flew up? Or where were you when Kennedy died? If you're old enough for that, I don't think you are. I am, barely. And so I think because it's kind of a traumatic experience, and I think that's why those dates get stuck in our memories so much. And we don't forget them. I think the important part for me is to learn to become less emotional about it, to be able to think about those dates and think about those occurrences. As a friend explained to me, it's like taking a book off the shelf, and you don't let yourself get emotionally involved. You just kind of read it, and you close the book and put it back on the shelf. When I look back at experiences with that attitude and that lightness, then I work through it, and now I can open the book and read it and not have that emotional trauma that I had before. And so now I remember, I don't forget, but I don't have the emotional content that comes with it.
Yeah. And
quite that emotional blow that I used to have.
But it is similar to PTSD. And I remember Corinne and I, we were convinced we were going to beat this bloody disease.
Oh, of course.
But we talked about, it's like, after this, I think we have to go talk to somebody, because this has been very traumatic for us. And we had it all planned out, mapped out of what we were going to do and the next steps to, get to the next part of our life, open wound. And hearing you when you were diagnosed on the 3rd of July, you said 2017. That's right when Corinne and we were diagnosed June 29th, 2017. Our doctors went out of town for 10 days for the 4th of July weekend or week. And like you, I went to everything. And and had to do it on my own for 10 days because our doctor was gone.
Mm.
You know, so
That's a big responsibility.
it's a big responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so.
But Corinne was so lucky to have had you. I mean, that was part of my story, was that I've done it mostly by myself, without very much support at all. And there are a handful of people who have tried and been really wonderful, and I'm really grateful to have had them there with me on the journey. But as far as treatment decisions, everything that I did, all the record keeping, you know, day-to-day logistics, I did on my own.
Oh, boy.
And so at least she had you, you know, at the end, and you were with her every single day, and that love, that means so much.
You know, if I was close, I'd be your support system, and we are your support system. And I know we have a whole
yes.
community that would be your whole support system, because
you are. The people in you, and there are other people on the internet I found as well who have been my support system. Yeah. You've been the ones when people step away when they know I'm using cannabis, when they won't help me financially because I'm using cannabis. They won't help me because they're afraid that I'm doing the wrong thing and that I'm killing myself by not getting allopathic treatment. You know, when all those people step away and scatter out of your life, and that's something you can expect when you use cannabis. Unfortunately, we're in a transition period now where some people are open to it and some are not. And that's kind of the reality of it. But
can you share with some of our listeners the difference between allopathic treatment as well as holistic and alternative?
Well, the first time I started with neoadjuvant, which meant I had chemotherapy first to shrink the tumor, and they were able to shrink it away from my skin, so I had a better cosmetic result, and I was very happy with that, I thought. And then I had my surgery, and 99.95% of the tumor was dead that they pulled out. They only found a couple of live cancer cells that were left when they pulled it out. And then I went through 30 days of radiation plus a boost. And they used 5 different chemo agents on me the first time. This time around, I decided I didn't even want surgery. I did allow them to do a needle biopsy because I didn't know of how else to prove whether it was cancer or not. Now I know that there are certain tests that you can take that I've learned about since that can detect cancer. So if you have something showing on a mammogram or thermogram and you want to know for sure whether it's cancer, you don't have to have a biopsy now. You can take a blood test. And if you have these cancer antibodies, then you just assume it's cancer and you start treating for cancer, but it saves that. The first thing I started using was cannabis, and then I started using things like Pectisol C, which is modified citrus pectin.
Yep.
That lowers your galectin-3 and prevents metastasis of the cancer. I took DIM. At the time, it was DIM with I3C, which now I'm not sure is the I3C is necessary, but the DIM is necessary. And I also took calcium D-glucarate. Once I was diagnosed cancer-free, I did take away the calcium D-glucarate because it was so expensive. But that was one of the ones I had to cut back on.
And these, the majority of those treatments, when you do alternative, they're not covered on insurance. Because I know we did Pectisol, immune therapy, we did stem cells, we did high vitamin C, name it, you know.
Right. I have been on a real budget. I have had no substantial. I had certain people help me in certain amounts, but you know, and I'm happy for every penny that I get. But it hasn't even dented what I really needed. And I had to really do this on a budget. I had a very small nest egg, not much money. And I had to, that was my nest egg for when I retired. And I decided I'd better spend it because if I didn't spend it, I might not get to the age where I could completely retire. So I've had to do everything on a budget. If there was something like an IVIC that I wanted to do, or GC math, which I really wanted to do, those things are just way out of my price league. There was no way I could do them. So I had to do this on a budget and find the most cost-effective ways of getting through this. And I was still spending tremendous amounts of money. I mean, at one point, I was spending $1,500 a month just on cannabis.
Wow.
plus supplements, plus other things. So I burned through my little nest egg very, very quickly. And, but I want people to know that and if I didn't have that nest egg, I don't know what I would have done. If my cancer would come back now, I don't know what I would do, because now it's gone. And now I'm living paycheck to paycheck.
Can you share some of your cost-saving tips that you found and that are working for you?
Well, sure. I lost my earphone here. One of the things that I found is the full extract cannabis oil is a very cost-effective way of getting cannabis. And when I was using it at the beginning and where I want to take for 2 at the end, let's say a rice grain or 2 rice grains a day that they talk about, or let's say, so many milligrams a day of THC. Dr. Franken goes between 15 and 30 as a maintenance dose.
Yeah.
So what you would do is take that gram, determine the number of milligrams, and then divide that and find out the number of pills you need. And you could stretch that little gram out to be 30 days or 38 days if you want to. And you could still get, like, let's say your 15-gram dosage a day that you need. By 15, I mean 15 CBD, 15 THC if you're on a 1-to-1 regimen. And it was a whole lot cheaper than buying the oil. If I was using a tincture or a spray or some other modality and I was trying to get 15 grams a day, it was a lot more expensive than taking the full extract cannabis oil and distributing it in pills. And that was a very cost-effective way that I saved a lot of money doing that.
How long did it take you to realize that?
I'm sorry, what?
How long did it take you to find this discovery?
Well, I found it pretty quickly because it was within a couple of weeks, I was starting to really react to the taste and really being put off. And I didn't think I could continue if I had to taste that, 3 times a day, every day. So I found the pill.
Yeah.
And I actually got the idea for that from the Sacred Plant because I had watched, I can't remember her name now, the woman in New York who owned the shop. And she was making her suppositories using coconut oil and her cannabis oil. And so that gave me the idea then to use a capsule. And I didn't melt, I decided to use MCT oil because I didn't want to melt things on the stove, because that was another cost-saving idea I had, was that when you have to transfer the oil to something and heat it and then transfer it to something else and then put it in the capsule, you're wasting a lot of product along the way and washing it down the drain. And so by injecting it with the syringe straight into the capsules and then throwing in the MCT, I wasn't wasting any product. So that saved me a lot.
And these syringes aren't injectable syringes. They're not with needles that Kristin's talking about. It's a syringe minus the needle. So it's basically just for measurement reasons. And they usually come in a 1 gram syringe, which you use, or up to a 10 gram syringe.
Yes. And what I do like, I prefer they call it, it's like a distribution needle. It looks like a needle, except that there's no point. It's not to go into the skin. All it is a hollow tube.
Yeah.
And that just helps you aim it down into the capsule and makes it go in very easily. And so you can buy those online very cheaply as well. And for instance, the syringes that I get, they have an attachment and I can hook one of those little dispensing needles on it. And that's how I get it into the capsule so easily.
You on a wellness dose right now?
Yeah, I did the Rick Simpson oil, and I went at one point I was up at a full gram a day, which turned out to be too much for me. It took me a long time to figure it out. And most of my treatment was actually done at 0.5 gram a day. And after the clean thermograms, then I cut back to a 1/4 gram a day. And now I'm at 1/8 of a gram a day. And I would like to cut back further, to stretch my dollars further. But right now, as soon as I cut back on 1/8 of a gram to something less, then my autoimmune symptoms start coming back. And so what I'm doing now is treating my other conditions with it and then hoping that it also keeps the cancer at bay.
Yeah. So you're treating, you have multiple conditions that you're treating with cannabis, but you're also a perfect example why more is not better.
Even when I did try cannabis, or when I was a little psychoactive on cannabis, I never felt good on it. I tend to get paradoxical reactions to lots of medications. Benadryl will keep me up at night. Sometimes it puts me to sleep. Most of the time it keeps me up at night. There are things that are supposed to speed me up that actually slow me down. So I get paradoxical reactions. So with cannabis, for some reason, instead of feeling pleasantly high like most people would, I tend to get a little bit irritable and uptight. And I'm also tend to be a very tense person to begin with, so maybe that's a tendency of mine. But the fact that I have paradoxical reactions, I think, is what actually gives me this unusual reaction. And I think the reason I've talked a lot today about those reactions is because they can happen to you when you're experimenting with cannabis. It's possible. But the smarter you are about it, the less likely it is to happen. And then I also wanted people to know that because I was experiencing, I was using high dosages, because I did experience these things, I want people to know that if it does accidentally happen to you, that it's not a scary thing. And I want people to know that there are reactions that are different from other people to high amounts of cannabis. And so when I was actually, rather than being in the treatment window, I was taking too much cannabis. I wasn't aware of it because I wasn't aware of what my personal body reaction was to the cannabis. So I just wanted people to be aware that, so they can look for those things, because there aren't many of us out there, but if it happens to you, it's good information to have so you can discover it sooner.
Can I ask you a question? Because this happens quite a bit on a lot of patients we work with. They go online and they read this Rick Simpson protocol, which is not really designed for everybody. And I just want people to
know, it's not.
The Rick Simpson protocol is taking a gram a day. It doesn't say if you're a 2-year-old child or a 95-year-old.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't say what's the percentage of THC or CBD is in that gram either, right?
Yeah, and so so a lot of people go right out of the gate and go a gram, and then they have a bad experience, and then they say, "I'll never do this."
Well, Rick teaches you how to titrate up, and it does work. You start out with 1 rice grain, and you do that for 4 days. And if you don't have any reaction and you're doing fine, then you do 2 rice grains a day for 4 days. And you keep doubling it in that exponential way. And because you're taking one-on-one CBD with the THC, you're not getting very psychoactive at all.
But his treatment protocol was not always with CBD. It was a high THC.
CBD and THC. They were both high. I was approximately a 1-to-1 ratio.
Which was not how he makes it is with paint thinner. And
he didn't do it. The stuff that I have is done with CO2.
Yeah, I know. So
it's non-toxic.
So it all changes. The true medical term is full extract cannabis oil, and so I don't want people just automatically think, I'm going to go get Rick Simpson protocol, and I share this all the time. It'd be like calling all types of coffee Starbucks coffee. Perfect example of more is not always better for a lot of patients. And if we would have given my father-in-law a gram a day and followed that protocol, I know he wouldn't be here today. And so Corinne and I said, let's start low and just see how we go. Mm-hmm. We found out with literally about 10 milligrams, we were having success. And people used to say, impossible, you can't have this success. Mm-hmm. And about a year later, I'm up at a conference, Corinne and I are up at a conference in Portland, Oregon, and we hear this doctor speaking, and it happened to be about microdosing, why less is more in a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh my gosh, this is the guy, this is exactly what we experienced ourselves. And that doctor, who's a dear friend of ours, is Dr. Sulek. And so you spoke, but he talked about, less is more. Not only less is more works in a lot of cases, but in cases like you can save money.
Right, exactly. And you want to be in that treatment window. Not enough cannabis, and you don't treat the symptoms or the disease that you're trying to treat. You don't get the effect you need. And too much, and you become psychoactive and have problems on the medication. In fact, some of the symptoms, for instance, seizures, will go away at the proper dose. But if you take too much, the seizures can actually come back. at too high a dose. So it's finding that perfect treatment window for everybody. And at the beginning, I didn't really know about microdosing. I watched the series quickly, but what was available to me was the RSO. And so I just went with it. And for me, part of my belief system was that if I hit it harder, that it would help it. So part of my belief system was that I needed a slightly higher amount. And so I think that might have helped me psychologically just deal with it better. But now I'm down to an eighth of a gram, which is still a lot. I'm taking let's say 38 grams a day, which is, for instance, for Dr. Alan Frankel, his treatment window is usually between 30 and 60 grams a day, or milligrams a day.
Milligrams.
I'm taking 38. Yeah, milligrams. And I'm taking like 38, which is in his treatment window, which is a little higher than his maintenance window.
Uh-huh.
And I would like to get down to that maintenance dose. And so I'm looking for that microdose. But like I said, my sweet spot seems to be a little bit higher. I'm at the 1/8 of a gram right now with my autoimmune system. And I feel so much better at that dosage that I'm going to keep it up. I'll still, every few weeks I'll try to work it down again.
Can you share the formulation that you're using with that right now?
Excuse me?
Can you share the formulation that you're on right now?
Oh,
are you on a 1-to-1 ratio, or what ratios are
yes,
you?
it's approximately a 1-to-1 is what I go for. But the problem is sometimes the 1-to-1 is a little CBD high. Sometimes it's a little THC high.
Okay.
They're not exactly consistent. So sometimes I have to compensate for the dosages. But I do the very best with it being just slightly CBD high. Almost 1-to-1. If the things that are actually created, that one oil is available in a CBD high, but the CBD is too high and the THC too low for me. And then they have the opposite one. I use their 1-to-1, but it's as close to 1-to-1 as they can get, without separating the ingredients and putting back together the formulation. So they're actually taking whole plant oil from particular buds, and so that's where the variation is coming in.
And you're doing this at night before bed, and it helps you sleep as well.
Yes, I actually do it like early in the evening, like 6, 7 o'clock, and then I'm ready to go to bed at 8:30, 9:30. I'm trying to get to bed earlier now.
Yeah. Do you find that you wake up going to bed that early throughout the night?
When I was taking iodine, yes. Now not so much. I only woke up once last night.
Good.
And I was fine. But it takes 2-3 hours to get in my system. So if I have it at 6 at night, then it's not really hitting me, and I'm not getting sleep until 8, 9 at night.
Good.
Which is when I want to go to bed. So that's why I take it that early, because I'm ingesting it. If I was using some other modality that was a faster delivery system, then I would be doing it later in the evening.
Good. And you know your body, and it sounds like you've taken incredible notes, but you know your body and on how to fine tune your body.
Mm-hmm. And I've learned I need to listen harder to my body. There are times when my body was giving me signals that I ignored, and came to regret that. But I'm learning. It's not so much regret. Okay, it was another learning experience. I know more now.
I like, since cannabis is not a one-size-fits-all, everyone's different. Hopefully one day it'll get to the point where you have this, take this, you have this, take that. But you've had to find your sweet spot. But you also found, for you, what times of the day, and you were pretty strict on what times of the day you ingested your medicine, correct?
At the beginning, I was very strict. I set up a schedule because I realized I wasn't sleeping well. I wanted to establish a circadian rhythm, so I decided to eat on a schedule and take my meds on a schedule, and maybe that would help regulate my circadian system. And I was splitting my gram between 3 doses a day, and I didn't like the taste. I just couldn't take the taste anymore. And one day I actually drew it back up, and I decided, well, that was a waste of money. I can't do that anymore. So I started making pills. I got empty pill capsules, and I started squirting into the pills and then filling the pills with an eyedropper with MCT oil. And I would prepare a whole week or so at a time and started taking pills. So I was doing that 3 times a day. When I cut back to a half gram a day, I was on intermittent fasting. So I was only eating twice a day. So I medicated twice a day as well and cut back. Now that I'm down to an eighth of a gram to a tenth of a gram, I keep trying to go down and popping back up. I'm just taking it once a day, and I take it in the evening because now it does make me a little bit more sleepy, a little bit more ready to fall asleep. So I dose single time.
And how are your sleep patterns? I know you have fibromyalgia, which is tough. Are you sleeping? Is it helping having more sleep in battling your fibromyalgia?
Yes. In general, yes. I'm sleeping better than I was before I got cancer and started using cannabis. I still have a lot of trouble with sleep. One of the things I learned, though, and I've just figured this out recently, and my sleep improved tremendously. I was taking too much iodine, and that was revving me up. And when I heard Andrew Saul, and he said that you really only needed 50 micrograms a day. And I was taking way too much. So I just started taking the iodine with my multivitamin, and I stopped any additional supplementation, and all of a sudden I'm sleeping better.
Good.
Better through the night for longer periods without waking up. But where I notice the cannabis helping is that it makes me sleepy in the evening, and then I'm able to relax. I'm able to fall asleep easily. And then without the iodine, I'm able to stay asleep for longer.
Good. And then for our listeners too, that are new to our group, you're not smoking this. It's more of an oil base, or I know you mentioned capsule, but have you ever ingest via smoking or no?
No, I did try it just once. I met a woman who said that she was using smoking, and I thought, well, in my whole life, I've never actually tried it.
Yeah.
I thought, what the heck? Why not try it for once? But because I was on the high dose from the Rick Simpson oil, I really got no effect from it at all. Taking a few hits of taking, 10, 20 grams, and I had been taking, even at half a dose or half a gram, I was taking like 200 grams a day. So actually, I didn't get high from the smoking at all. And I tend to react a little bit different than most people to pot, or I shouldn't use that word, that's a bad word, to cannabis. People take it so that it increases their appetite, but it decreases mine. I read that. A lot of people get happy on it. I get agitated and irritable on it. So I kind of have this opposite reaction from other people, and that's why it took me a long time to figure out what was going on.
Have you tried? And I know you mentioned that you would get your medicine from a local dispensary there that tests and everything else like that, but they would do one batch. One batch would come in, and this is why I think, God, I hope one day it becomes true medicine, that you guarantee every single time that you take it is going to be the same formulation, same terpenes, and so that you're running, right?
Yeah, I'm getting whole plant oil there were two different companies that sell here in Reno primarily. And they have very detailed labels with, THCV, THCA, whatever happens to be in there. They have very detailed testing labels. I also took one from one of the companies to a lab when I very first started doing this, because I wanted them to test it so that I knew that I could rely on the label. And the label wasn't exactly right, but it was in the ballpark. So I knew I could trust the company. And what the label really helped me to do is that sometimes I would get, let's say, a gram that would have 490 grams of THC in it. And the next time I get one with 380 grams. And so what I would do is I would base what I wanted to do on my 400 grams. And then I would have to make either a little bit fewer pills or a little bit more pills. I would either stretch it or condense it a little bit depending on the THC content, so I would get the dose that I want. So I had to be very aware of the changes from time to time. There was one time when I was coming down after I was giving you all clear, and I started decreasing. And Sesson Sulak talked about, he's a physician in Maine. He's wonderful. And I consulted with him over the phone. He said that if you wait 48 hours that you will become resensitized. Because if you get too sensitized, as you're building up, then it takes more and more THC and oil to get the effect that you want. And so if you go off for 48 hours and then you start again, then it's more effective. So you can lower the dose and get the same effectiveness. And so I was doing that on my way down, and there was a time when I took 2 days off, and then I started up again, but I started at half the dose. It's kind of, you go down exponentially, just like you go up exponentially. And what I didn't realize is that I'd gone from something that was, let's say, a 375 or 380. Now all of a sudden this was like a 495 of THC. So even though I cut my dose, it was still more THC than I had been taking for the last few weeks. And so I actually overdosed on it a little bit, and I got to experience what people go through when they eat too many edibles, when the world starts moving and your heart starts pounding. And for me, it wasn't a pleasant overdose at all. But thank goodness I watched your series, because I knew to expect that when I overdosed. And so I knew I was happy, and I just laid on the couch and decided to go to sleep. I just thought I'll just sleep it off. And I slept through the night, and when I woke up the next morning, I was fine. It was
Good.
Not a big deal.
Good.
My friend went to a party where they were serving marijuana and brownies, and she was afraid to try it. She didn't want to drive home under the influence, but she was curious. So my friend took it home with her, and she didn't know about edibles, and she ate the whole brownie, and she overdosed, but no one had told her to expect what a overdose might be like, and that it might be unpleasant. And she was really afraid because she didn't know what was happening to her. And now she has a condition, an autoimmune condition, and I know that Alan Frankel is treating that condition in his offices. But my friend will have nothing to do with cannabis now, and won't go in for cannabis treatment because of that negative experience she had. And so I'm so glad that you're getting the word out about edibles. I just really don't like people using edibles, and unless they're very experienced and know exactly what they're doing. But especially for newbies, you need to experience everything first. And then if you wanted to try something, you would be more coming from a better educated place.
I know veterans who have used cannabis their whole lives that won't do edibles anymore. I have a good friend of mine that took this, and he said, I'll never, he goes, I shook, I threw up, did everything. And he won't do edibles. Perfect example, like your friend, my father-in-law, when we first diagnosed back in 2011, I went down to the dispensary and I got him an edible, little piece of chocolate, and he tried it, and he was uncomfortable, and he didn't want to try it again. I said, God, please, just trust me again, and he trusted me, and we went to about 2 milligrams, and he didn't feel anything, but it upped his appetite, which is exactly what we were looking for. And the rest is history. He's still alive today. But we did that. He had an uncomfortable experience with an edible. And so that's why it's so important that we cover this topic on edibles. Just because something tastes delicious and it's such a small little piece doesn't mean it's not potent. And sometimes it takes an hour or something for you to feel anything. And 45 minutes later, you said, and I'm not feeling something. Let me eat it again. And now you have a double dose. And it's not something like if you have too much alcohol, you can throw up and feel better. It's in your system, and you're gonna have to ride it out. So
But going to sleep is a good way of riding it out.
Going to sleep, taking a bath if you're able, hot showers, eating some peppercorns. I shared a book with you earlier, and this is something that got Corinne and I through a lot. And it's called Heal Your Body by Louise Hay. It's very, very thin. You can read it in 10, 15 minutes max. But how you talk about meditation and tapping and faith and your belief system and cannabis and other nutritional, your foods and your other supplements. I think, combining everything on your journey to healing is very important. And I thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity to get the word out. I mean, you reach so many hundreds of thousands. I don't know how many people you reach with these videos. And
I reached you, and if I can, Corinne and I looked at it. If we can reach one person, then we know what we're doing. We're on the right path. And so, thank you.
You definitely reached me. I think we were destined to wind up, here today, sitting here doing this.
And I have to share, and I have to share that when we did why you contacted me one day is because you saw the interview that Cindy and I had.
Mm-hmm.
So that touched you, and and Cindy was nervous to share her story, and I said, and she even actually she even mentioned in our interview that if I can help one person, that I know what I'm doing here today by being in this interview, it was worth it. And I just want to let Cindy know, for I hope you're watching this, Cindy, is that your story touched Kristin so much that she called me, and that's what led to our interview today. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you, Cindy.
I think that was the most powerful interview you did. She was the most impressive woman, and her husband was just wonderful.
They were incredible, and they were a husband-wife team, and they didn't know who I was, and I shared my story with Corinne, and when I shared that, we just bonded. And so thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Kristin, as well.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
And thanks to everyone who's listening with an open mind and learning and taking advantage of this education that you're providing for everyone.
Bless you. I mean, bless you with everything, and I know we'll be in touch.
Thank you for being there, for setting me off on my journey on the right foot. It's been powerful.
Yeah.
And I hope to stay associated with you. I'll keep following everything you do.
I appreciate your support as well, and bless you, and wishing you a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, Kristin.